And while you're doing that, I was recently in Menorca. We've got an interesting program where we're taking serial entrepreneurs and we're helping them with their next venture. And one of the guys there is in the carbon credit space. It's something I'm convinced he can ramp up to $1 billion. And the first thing we did is take out the piece of paper and begin to write the list. And I think rightfully so, he wrote down Al Gore as the first person. Because if Al gets behind anything that's involved with carbon credits, you're going to win bigger than if you're competing with the company that Al is supporting. And so make that list. By the way, there's a part of the world right now that really doesn't know our work. And so the first thing we did at our hour marketing meeting, which is every Monday, we took a piece of paper and we said, all right, who are the 25 most influential people in that country that we have got to get to if we're going to be able to be known? And then all we're doing now is working that list. Now, take a moment, turn to your neighbor, and I want you to at least say out loud the name of this person you need to get to next. Go. All right, let me welcome you back. Now, once you've got the list, let's take the advice of Keith Ferrazzi, and never eat alone. Let me tell you one of the fundamental shifts in the kind of a cultural shift for me. When I was in the Washington, D.C. area, which is where our company's headquartered, out in Ashburn, Virginia, I got to tell you, I'm this kind of type A personality who's going to sit at his desk and I'm going to work through lunch because I'm getting stuff done. And by the way, the traffic's a little rough around D.C., so I had all kinds of excuses not to do this. Now, you move to Barcelona, Spain, and it's a different culture, man. You've got 2.5-hour lunches with vino. It's a wonderful, wonderful lifestyle, I can tell you. And what was interesting, in the first 36 months we were there, we've been there now for 6 years, making sure that I had 2 or 3 lunches every single week, I was better connected to the community, both politically in the business world and the academic world and socially, than I was in the 30 years prior to being in the United States. And so my strong recommendation is that you make sure you don't waste. The word company's Latin derivative means to share bread. And so don't waste a meal, breakfast or lunch or snack, and work your list. Now, I think what's interesting, though, is I mentioned it takes 25 years to kind of scale up a business, but what about Facebook? I mean, you got Mark Zuckerberg doing stuff here in months that takes everybody else years. What is it that we can possibly learn from this mere mortal that we can apply to scaling up our businesses? And it always comes back to this. It is the intellectual capital within the business. It comes back to brain power. By the way, I got a picture of the male brain. It's slightly different. We have 4 children. Our youngest is 7, and my wife will conclude that I've never heard a single one of our children cry in the middle of the night ever. And so, hey, it's just being male. But it comes back to this. And so we understood that last century we had to get the right butts on the right seats, as Jim Collins suggested. But that is not sufficient. Who's winning and winning big is doing one extra thing. It's the key to Amazon's success. It's the key to Facebook's success. It's the key to Google's success. Many, many, many other companies. And it's this. How do you get the most who's on your bus? How do you engage the most people in whatever it is that you need to do? Let me tell you what I think is the story of the last few months. So you got a couple of young Aussies, a father-son team down in Australia that have invented this way to harvest honey. By the way, it's with an amazing trend, all of us wanting to go to more local food. We're sick and tired of Monsanto poisoning us around the planet. And so, using a 3D printer technology, they come up with a device, $600, that makes it easier for the humans and the bees to kind of get and give up the honey. Now, you're an entrepreneur, and they were hoping to maybe sell the first 1,000 units to kind of get 60,000 together, just to kind of start to scale up and ramp up. And so they did something interesting. They put it up, as Joey did, up on Indiegogo, and said, let's see if we can kind of tap in to the community around the world. And by the way, that isn't crowdfunding, that's crowd buying. These are pre-orders. Well, the rest is history. In 3 hours, they had sold 1 million. In 14 hours, they had sold 2 million. And when the campaign wrapped up 60 days later, they had sold $12 million to 36,000 people all over the globe. Now, I don't know about you, but usually from startup to 10 plus million takes slightly longer than 60 days. And that's what you can do. Now, Alex Osterwalder, I thought, did something brilliant with his business model generation book. And he said, look, when I'm going to put that book out there, I want to tap into my community. And this was a book that was basically crowdsourced from 470 of their global participants that are behind his particular one-page strategic plan. And it's no doubt then when the book launched on Amazon, there it is. He's got 548 customer reviews. And so even though us, as speakers and thought leaders, it's important for us to set our ego aside. In fact, man, I experienced it. So I put out this book called Scaling Up last year, and I actually thought that was a great looking cover. It was black and white, it was thick, and I put it out to about 500 of our world, and I got to tell you, they sent me back. And look, I'm looking for typos, a few mistakes. I gave them a month, and they came back and gave me a book worth of critique and criticism. They basically said my baby was both ugly and stupid. It hurt, man. It hurt. And so that's what the crowd created. And we've been real proud of how well it's done. And so what are you going to do to tap into a whole lot more brains in order to scale up your business? Now, I want to get to strategy. So there's our people piece. It's all about the who's and getting the most who's on the bus and your bus. Now let's look at strategy. And our key question there is, can you state your strategy simply? Again, I was down in Australia and I saw this. We are number one in the number two business. Like you don't. And for those of you who don't know, that number two means they're pumping poop. All right? Now, this doesn't matter if you don't need poop pumped, but they are the best in the business. And so we created a framework that we call the 7 Strat. And the very first decision you absolutely have to get right. And I know Neem's going to talk more about thought leadership and the other here later this morning. But for me, it comes down to something very simple. What's the word or two you own? I remember when Julie had our first child, Cameron, 18 years ago. We had a convertible. We were living in Boulder, Colorado, enjoying our time there. But she now wanted the absolute safest car. Nobody can own a car, but what did we buy as the safest car? Volvo. Now, many, many years later, the kids are old enough. We want to go back and have fun, and so we wanted to get a convertible. We wanted a car with a great driving experience. So what did we get? Well, we got a Mini, but it's, cut me some slack. It parks easier in Barcelona. In fact, David Dow's here. David, I don't know where you are, but you guys have been clients for years, and he's got a company called Trench Safety, and I love that. The name of his company says precisely what he owns in the minds of the market. I'm a construction company. I need to dig a trench, and I don't want to kill people along the way. It's Trench Safety that I go to. Tim Ferriss tells a story about the original name of his book that basically bombed. And so he went back and using the Google search engines, figured out that 4-hour would be a couple of good words to own. Backstage, I saw Mark Sanborn, the Fred factor, and what he's been able to do with those two words. Now, as Jeffrey introduced, I am known as the growth guy. And by the way, how do you know if you own a couple of words? You go to the search engines, any place on the planet, and you put those two words, and you see if you own that critical, valuable real estate. And I do. The problem is this: nobody searches for it. I mean, when's the last time anyone's sitting around saying, man, I need a growth guy? Unless it's like Viagra related, and that ain't my deal, guys. That's not my deal. And so I screwed up. You know, they often say, no one's worthless. They can at least serve as a bad example, and that has been me. Now, we think we know the two words we need to own, and we're getting about it. But you got to figure this out. And so, now back to work. I want you to share with your neighbor, what do you think are the two words, maybe you already own them, that you need to get a hold of and be known for? Go. See what you come up with. Share. Good to see you. All right. Thank you. Okay. All right. Let me welcome you back. So, my focus in our company has been really east of Europe, and so I go through Istanbul a lot, and I saw this recent story about Ali, and to me, this is the essence of what we've got to do. Here's a guy who had passion for carving wood, and so he ends up making a career of carving for, sitting room and dining room sets for furniture companies. But then he did something important. He specialized. No, he didn't specialize. He hyper-specialized. And he said, look, here's what I love to do. I want to carve wooden doors, only doors, but not just any wooden door. I want to carve wooden doors for churches, but not any churches. I want to carve wooden doors for large Christian churches. He's from Tay, this area in Turkey that's kind of Christian-based. Now, he'll do a mosque or two, but this is a single business kind of practitioner sitting in this obscure little province in the southern part of Turkey who's got brand everywhere around the planet. And if you are a large Christian church who needs a wooden door carved, you're going to stay in line and pay a fortune for Ali to do the work. And so the mistake we see most people make is they don't hyper-specialize enough. And when you do, then you've got a shot at owning those words in enough minds to piece together the 100,000, the million, or the several million moving forward. Let's now shift to execution. And there it's all about relentless repeatability. And it's about keeping the main thing the main thing. The problem is easy to say, but how the heck do I figure that out? So I want to tell you a story about Mark. And so he's getting ready to take the company public in 2012, but that December he wakes up in a cold sweat like the rest of us and said, oh my God, we are about to screw up. We have missed the most important trend on the planet, and that's people aren't using their PCs anymore. They have switched to mobile. And Facebook and all the competitors had not made the switch. So every quarter, one of their routines, he puts up a big white tent, and all their employees are required to attend. At the time, he had 3,200 employees. He had 2,000 local, 1,200 around the globe. And they're all thinking he's there to announce the fact that we're going to be focused on this pending IPO. By the way, that's a pretty big thing to do, to go public. Yet he hardly mentioned it in passing. What he said to his team was, what I need you to do, I'll handle that distraction. What I need you to do is I need you to laser focus, keep your head down, continue to focus, and deliver and get us mobile. And for the next several months, Mark got on message. Every single person he saw, every single decision was all around. What do we have to do to get mobile? Every hiring decision, every line of code, every acquisition was to get them mobile. Now, in the meantime, he gets public. $38 within a few months. The stock literally crashes in half. Even as a writer for Fortune, we're sitting there beating him up. Maybe the boy wonder's luster is gone. But he kept focused. And the rest is history. They got mobile. And in the next 18 months, they had replaced 75% of their revenue. 98% of their revenue growth came from this entire new channel. By the way, what do you call that blue line, by the way? That non-mobile advertising? That's called Yahoo right there. Because she's not been able to make this important decision. See, I know Mark and you have got thousands of things on your plate. You're getting dumped on more at this event. But what you've got to do is think about it. By the way, the stock did recover. It ended up being double. I just checked last night, almost $95, $267 billion in market cap. And so what you've got to do is focus. And here's the guy. If you said, look, Verne, I got time to read a book in business. I consider the #1 business book ever written was by Eli Goldrath, called The Goal. Any of you guys read the book? I just want to see kind of a show of hands. Good. And by the way, it was one of the early books that was written in a parable. Now, Eli Goldrath taught us two very critical things. First, don't smoke. I mean, this guy died about the same year that Steve Jobs did of lung cancer. This is terrible, so I hope you don't do that. But here's the key thing. And he called it the theory of constraint. See, look, even Facebook has limited time, limited resources, limited effort, like everyone else sitting here in this audience. And what you have to do is always apply your effort to that constraint. Now, I'm not talking about problems. We are not a company that's about solving problems. We'd rather go after what's working and do more of that. No, this is about the constraint that's out there. And if you don't focus your energy on what's constraining the growth of your speaking business, whatever it is next, you're spinning your wheels. And so I want to pull a story out of my second book, The Greatest Business Decisions. And so Robert Taylor is launched soft soap in the early 80s. And by the way, he makes a big bet, spends $7 million, takes this thing to $39 million its first year. Now, I've got a question for you, and I want you to shout it out. What is his next biggest concern? You've just taken a company from 0 to $39 million in 1 year. What's his next biggest concern? Shout it out. Maybe. By the way, maybe means no. I'm just trying to be nice to the audience here. Maybe. Now, one of you said it. The competition. Somebody's stealing the idea. And look, this guy had been around the block a couple of times. He knew that Colgate-Palmolive could come in any moment and wipe him out. And so he made a very important decision. And he realized that the constraint of this entire business was the spring pump. See, back in 1980, there was only one company that happened to be in California. We're talking about many years before China even comes online that makes the spring pump. So he goes out and visits the company. And the biggest order they'd ever fulfilled was 5 million units. And he said, how many can you guys make in a year? And they said 100 million. He said, sold. And at 12 cents, he bet $12 million to lock up the constraint. And the rest is history. When Colgate-Palmolive tried to jump in and copy him, there were no spring pumps. Now, this wasn't lost on Steve Jobs, who had had his own software ripped off by his friend Bill Gates in terms of Windows. And so when he launched the iPod, trying to get Apple out of its mess, he knew that Sony and others could have copied it in a moment. But there was a proprietary Toshiba hard drive that he locked up the worldwide rights to, so that when they did launch, the rest is history. Right now, we know that solar energy and electric cars are all the rage. But the reality is what's always been the choke point of that industry? The battery. And so it's not by accident that Elon Musk has been giving away all of his knowledge about making electric cars. He's not stupid. He knows that Ford and Toyota and many others could wipe him out in a moment's notice. What he wants to do is control the key component. For me, the first constraint was that we had some children, and I needed to get off the road, and I needed to build a business that had others, that would make me money while I slept. Part of that was I needed a book that I could afford, so we self-published. So I could have books at $2.18, 4-color, 256 pages. So I could give them away like credit cards and business cards. Not credit cards, like business cards. Where the hell did that come from?